My name is Eve, and Rory here. We'll talk to you a bit about what Ulster Wildlife is doing with conservation, but using high tech. So we're both from the Peatlands team, so there'll be a bit of focus on that, but we'll run you through also what the other teams are doing. So just a wee introduction of our team. So that's me using a high accuracy GPS, and then Rory that will talk with his drone, and then Jessica also with a drone, and Claire and then our colleagues with cameras, and our big boss putting in a big water level monitoring device in the ground. um, so first, I thought I would talk to you about the cool toys, I guess, what I get to use a lot. So the drones, we have quite a few now, getting a big enough fleet. So we have a small drone that we'll use a lot more for footage and a few bit of before after photos. If you want a real size comparison, it would probably be more that size. And then the big drone here, the Matrice 300, that we use to actually collect imagery on site. Big kit. And we're hopefully getting a new piece of kit, which is a Wingtra, which is a fixed wing, and that will help us actually fly larger areas using less battery. But I'll go a wee bit in more details about what we use them for. So the small drone, as I said, very easy to carry. So that means we can just have it in our backpack when we're surveying our sites. Um, the Peatlands team, we do a lot of, well, our main work is restoring bogs, right? So we will do a lot of monitoring of before and after restoration. So we'll use those guys to do before after we say fixed point monitoring. So here it's on Gary bog. I will talk a lot about this bog because that's where um, a lot of my time has been taken this year anyway. So that was taken just before the work starting, and then just after you can see some pit dams in the ground. And then that's a few weeks later, we've also reprofiling on the edge, so the bank is now made a bit more straight and you can see how much water it's holding. Of course, it's also winter, so a lot more water, but it's a good to give a time lapse, and it's very nice to see how the work are actually affecting the bog. This wee drone, we also use it just to survey site, especially if we just want a quick look around huge areas and we have little access. It's just good to have an overview of the site, and it takes really nice photos, so it's good to see. About the bigger drone, so yeah, that's a bigger guy anyway. We will use it to fly. Oh, sorry. We will use it to collect imagery of the sites we want to work on. Um, so that's usually what it does. Should have turned that off. That would have made it easier. But yeah, it's quite cool to see take off anyway. Um, we will fly quite large areas, so we'll fly all the bugs we're gonna work on, and you can see here on the right what a flight plan is. So we'll map the area we want to collect, and it will do mostly automatically draw the flight plan, and we kind of have an idea of how long it will take. Of course, it always take longer, it's technology. Um, First, it's always a lot to carry. There's just here the suitcases for the main drone. Then we have a GPS satellite connector. We have the camera, and then we have a huge suitcase that's like 10 kilos of batteries that we have to carry around. So sometimes a wee bit of a nightmare. Um, and for big areas, sometimes we unfortunately run through all our batteries quite quickly. So we've been thinking about this over drone that's fixed wing that's supposed to maybe be able to take off from farther and fly longer and larger areas. But what you want to know is actually what do we get from those drones? So that drone will give us very, very high quality imagery. So that's also from Gary Bog. Um, and if I can show you zoomed in, you see how actually the quality is. You can zoom in quite in. It says around 1 centimeter per pixel. But you can see the area with all the drains, some pit banks. Even in the bottom, you can see some pools. So it's really good to have an idea of the site. But the actual cool technology with it, we get to use another camera that's called LiDAR, and that's use laser or like photons of light to send to the ground, and we'll record what comes back. And that's kind of like a sonar, but using with light, and that helps us create actually a model of like the elevation of the site. So what we could get from it is this thing that we call a digital surface model, which shows everything that comes back up, all the elevation, so the buildings, the trees in this case, but also the drains, etc. This is very useful to map trees on a site, especially very large, because you can pick up actually all those dots coming up. But what we actually like, and what's actually the point of LiDAR, is that those lights, this light laser can actually penetrate the vegetation and go to the ground. And that gives us actually this, which is very colorful, but shows the ground elevation, which here is a digital elevation model. It just makes it very clear to see the drains. I can show it zoomed in, so you can see now the drop of the pit bank where it's red and it's been cut over, and then all those lines that shows us the drain. But even more, you can pick up a bit the pools as well at the bottom. So that just makes it very clear for us what's happening on the site, what has been degraded, and what we can do in the future. So once we have this map, we can actually, no, when we have this imagery, sorry, we can actually map the ground and see all those drains. It's a lot on this site. It's a bit of a, yeah, it was a big task anyway. But we can also see where the water goes. So from the elevation and then with the drains, the computer can model where the water would go if it was starting from the middle. So that will help us decide on what we'll do for restoration. And I can show you, it will see like a lot, but that was our main restoration plan of the site. So showing all the type of drain blocking that we would use and reprofiling of banks, etc. So it's quite a lot. But we've been using the imagery for a lot of other stuff. Here it's Hoy's bog. It's bogs that we recently acquired, and it's an old so bog that's been cut over completely for compost. So it's completely bare. It's quite sad to see at the moment, but hopefully we'll get it through to health soon enough. But using imagery and using this really high quality imagery, we've been using our laptop to classify the pixel and actually kind of automatically tell us what the ground is like, so what vegetation there is. So you can see here, it calculated all the black areas would be bare pit. Then you have orange area are like bog cotton, which would be the first vegetation to come back, so kind of a start of revegetating. And then the pink would be actually the heather, and you get a bit of tree. So we'll be using that and take photos every few years, so probably in 5 years and 10 years after restoration to see actually how much it has evolved. So it's a really good way to actually show, like an image of like the change over time and actually the effect of restoration, which sometimes is a struggle to actually show proper effect, positive change. And a last quick one is we end up mapping a lot of big areas. So that's up on the mountain in Slivenany. And from the elevation, you can see that it seems to have a lot of up and down. So it's a lot of hags and degradation feature. In the past, we would have mapped them all by hands, and that would take a lot of people to help. But we've been trying to automate it to actually make the laptop through our geographic software actually map all those lines, and I don't know why it's so terrible, I'm so sorry. But it's supposed to share a lot of lines anyway. It's like a few kilometers of hags. But I think that's me, and I will stop sharing and pass to my colleague if I can. Yes. You're muted, Rory.
How you doing, folks? My name is Rory. I also work in the Peatlands team with Eve. I'll just get this up. And I'm going to start out by talking to you a little bit about how we use tech actually out in the field. So most of what Eve's been talking about there, it is captured in the field, but then it's kind of the processing of it. So that what Eve done in that earlier stage, it kind of feeds into these plans that she mentioned earlier. So this is one of those plans shown on field maps, which is how we kind of work with this on the ground. That's available to us on our phone. We can use that to navigate around the site, see where we've got the drains at, where we're going to put our interventions at. We can pass that on to contractors that we're working with, all that kind of stuff. But the problem is the GPS in your phone is not that accurate. So it will only give you roughly 5 meters accuracy. And if we're trying to work with those kind of like what you can see there on the left-hand side, those drains that are very close together, it can be difficult to actually work out which one you're standing at. So we use this thing known as GNSS, which is essentially a form of GPS type navigation system, but it uses a whole range of other satellite networks and can reduce that 5 meters down to 10 centimeter accuracy. It's extremely accurate, um, which is useful for when we're doing our plans for our kind of restoration. So the reason that we need it is so that we can map out where things like this are going to go. So that's a plastic peak dam, but we need to put those little flags out so that contractors and other operators know where to go to put them in. So GNSS, this is just a kind of breakdown. You've got your GPS, which is what we normally use, but all these other countries have their own satellite networks. You've got GLONASS, Galileo from Europe, and GNSS just makes use of all of those to give you a more accurate picture. So one of the other things we do in the field is water level monitoring. So one of the most important things for restoring a bog is getting the water table back up again. We have two different types of water monitors. We have these ones on the left here, manual monitors. So they have a little logger device in them that you have to go around and manually check. Um, it just records over time what the water table at the site is doing. And the one on the right that our friends from Germany here are installing is a remote water monitor. So that has a transmitter unit in it as well, which feeds into an app we have on our phones and on our laptops, so we can constantly monitor it all through the year. These also need extra information from weather stations, which we have across some of our sites, which record uh, rainfall levels, they record wind speeds, they record wind direction, temperature, all that kind of stuff. We can take that data along with the water monitoring, and it produces graphs, something like this, where we can follow kind of in live time whether how far below the surface level that water is. In an unrestored bog, you're seeing constant fluctuations up and down, up and down, up and down. What we want to see in a restored bog is a much flatter line over time. So again, a third type of monitoring, what we have to do in the field, and probably one of the most important reasons for restoring our bogs is looking at carbon and gas exchange. So this uh, device on our colleague's back here that looks something like from Ghostbusters is a Lycor soil gas flux analyzer. So this basically uses this little chamber that it's got here, and it measures the amount of CO2 and methane being produced in that little chamber. So it gives you a very, very accurate measurement at a very local level. If you want to do a large site, you need to do lots and lots of these little chambers everywhere. The other option for a big site is this, which is a eddy covariance flux tower. This is a much more permanent setup. It's constantly measuring the CO2 and the methane produced at this site. and it can give you a long-term picture of whether that site is a source of climate change gases or a sink of climate change gases. Bird monitoring is another thing that we do in the team. So we've kind of got our old school form of bird monitoring here. A load of people out in the field listening for birds and watching for birds, and it's great fun, but it's hard to do for big parts of the year. And then this is our new school way, which is basically a little box that we can put out wherever we want. And it can constantly record for over a month at a time. We can set these out all over our sites, get those back in. It'll record for a couple of hours at dawn, a couple of hours at dusk. We take that data and we can feed it into this, which is a software known as Chirpity. Chirpity analyzes the results from those recordings and it can give us a full list of the species that we've recorded in the time that device has been out. It breaks them down and gives you how certain it is that that is the species. So we see here that reed bunting, it's 92% certain that that is a reed bunting that is recorded. And it can tell you how many times it's recorded each individual species. So it's a very, very useful and powerful form of data, but it isn't 100% reliable. We will need to go back and listen to all of these and just make sure if something says it's 50% chance, it may be, it may not be actually recorded, but we can go back and check that by hand. So AI, it's increasingly becoming a part of kind of all different types of work, and conservation is no different. So it's a useful tool for us in certain areas. Chirpity, what I just mentioned there, it uses AI to identify those different bird species. It's similar to Merlin, which some of you may have used in your phones. Um, we are also going to be trialing something known as AMI, which is an automated insect monitoring that we're going to install at one of our sites. Um, it's not a supplement to expert knowledge, but it's not a replacement of expert knowledge, but it is a supplement and will help us and hopefully make our lives easier. We can see the AMI unit here to the right, and below it is how it would look at and interpret those insects that it's seeing on the white screen in front of it. So hopefully in the future, our lives will get a little bit easier identifying all of these different bog species. We've got a whole range of them. So moving on, although me and Eve might think it is at times, the Peatland team isn't the only team in Ulster Wildlife. And in fact, some may say that other teams are marginally more interesting than us, but we wouldn't believe that for a second. So the species team are the cute, fluffy stuff guys. So this is Katie Bell and this is Ross, and they look after our kind of species specific monitoring. So they have a number of different projects. The first and probably the one that maybe most people know about is the Northern Ireland Red Squirrel Survey. So Katie and Ross do a Northern Ireland wide study where they put up these little boxes of food at sites across hundreds and hundreds of sites across Northern Ireland. They get volunteers to help them. There's whole red squirrel networks and all sorts of people involved in it. And at each one of those boxes, there is one of these trail cameras opposite it. And every time a animal of any type comes to it, it'll take a photo of it. It'll stay out for 2 week period, and we can track then if there's red squirrels come to it, if there's grey squirrels come to it, and if there's pine martens come to it. They're the three species that they're interested in. Katie also wanted me to mention that any recordings that any of you guys have where you maybe see red squirrels about the place, make sure you submit them on our website at Ulster Wildlife /report sightings. So here's a little photo of one of these little cute red squirrels. He looks well fed, that fella. He's done well out of that peanut box, I think. But yeah, so the trail cameras that we use, they can take photos in the daylight, but they also have infrared sensors to take photos at night. And I found in the ones that I've done that actually we probably get more recordings at night, particularly for things like pine martens. Oh, here's one of those pine martens in question. Always wary. Never seen them in real life. It's amazing how many places we actually have them now. Pretty much ever I've done a bit of this camera trapping, I've seen one, but I've never seen one in real life. The other thing that Katie's team looks after, again, very cute, fluffy, interesting. A lot more people interested than maybe what me and me and Eve do, is the barn owl survey. So Katie looks after and Ross look after kind of barn owl records and kind of helping the species thrive in Northern Ireland. One of the things that they use to help their work with this is infrared spotting scopes. So we can see here this is at night and it's using infrared to make that bird much, much more visible. Without that, all we would be seeing is black there. And they put up these owl boxes all over Northern Ireland, particularly in the east, because there's a little bit less rainfall in the east, and the owls generally do better in that side. But until recently, these were going up, hoping that owls could use them. Great initiative, obviously they did. But recently, they have started putting Nest cameras in some of these boxes, which allows them to have a much more intimate view of what goes on inside of these boxes. Um, so they can see when eggs are laid, how many chicks hatch, make sure nothing's predating on them, make sure no other birds are trying to bully their way into the nests. Um, yeah, it's made their lives a lot easier. And also, it kind of gets people engaged, and it's a great way to kind of share footage of an iconic species we have here in Northern Ireland. And we'll pass it back over to Eve now. She's just going to talk to you a little bit about what the marine team does.
Yes, so should have had already, but
She's giving you a good look at what she's going to say down there as well.
sorry, I'm trying to switch it and it's not wanting me to. Why is it not letting me? Ah, sorry guys, 2 seconds. I just need the taskbar to go away. All right. Yes. So I will, without reading everything that's said in here, I'm just gonna present a bit the marine team. They're the other big team that's been growing at Ulster Wildlife in like the last few years, a bit like us. So we've become a bit the big tech user as well. And I've had a lot of cool stuff to talk about. So we've selected a few. But from what I've learned with them is talking about marine life is quite difficult without showing, imagery. And the problem here is that a lot of it is either very far away from the coast or underwater and makes it quite hard to communicate about it and get people maybe more invested in the marine life. So they've invested a lot in technology to help bridge that gap. Um, and technology to help see underwater, but also off the coast and just get people a bit more connected. And I think they said also to mention that they've been using other sensors as well to use to get information on water like salinity and temperature, which is quite useful to know for conservation. Um, so one of the first thing, which I think is quite cool, is the underwater. It's the marine drone, really. And I've got to play with one once. It was quite fun. But the marine team just got a new recent ROV or remote operated vehicle that they can use underwater to map the seabed. This one is quite state of the art. I think it has now GPS, and you can see in the middle image something that makes it able to stay in the same position. It's a bit different, like you would have a drone in the sky hover, but of course, underwater you have like waves and like the water going every way. So usually smaller ROV would actually be pushed and very difficult to stay, and then you couldn't really get an idea of where the drone is once it's quite far underwater and not really good data for mapping. But so with this stabilizer, they're able to actually stay, and I think that's what you can see in that video, even with quite a bit of current actually, so it's quite cool. So against the tide, yeah, and the flow. They've also have, I think, really cool tech. So a bit like our LiDAR, they have laser in there to actually map the seabed and photo, for example, where the oysters are gonna be. Um, but also they can just be used to film what's on the seabed. So I think here it's a video collected in Stratford Loch, where you can see a few things, but I think at the end you can see a crab uh, having its lunch. Yes, I think just here. So it's quite cool. I think just for us, isn't for myself, I think just getting a bit more imagery of what you would see under there, how much wildlife there is as well that we never get to see. It's quite cool. The other thing, they also use drones. We're not the only one. Um, they've been using, I think, drones from like normal imagery to help maybe see farther away from the coast. I think they've been used in the past to study pregnancy in whales and dolphins. But here in Northern Ireland, what's been used recently is using thermal drones, so using body heat that reflects to study seals, because seals are mammals, they're warm-blooded, so they're quite, it's quite a good way to sometimes spot them when they can actually blend with their surrounding. So I don't know how many seals you can see in that photo, but I'm going to show it with thermal imagery and see if you see as many. Um, so I don't know if you had a keen you might have spotted the three and or the fourth one there that's a bit hidden. But thermal imagery has been used because it's really faster way and very more accurate way of seeing those animals. Um, and I think, as Rory mentioned previously, AI has been starting to be used in all fields, including conservation. So I think for the future, they're hoping to train machine to actually count how many seals there is instead of you having to review all the footage and count one by one. So using machine learning and then artificial intelligence. Um, so I think here, well, the square shows what the laptop has identified as a seal, and you can see it's, I mean, it's quite visible. It's so much brighter because it's a warm body in a cold water. Um, but it's really at the early stage, I think, and the hope is to collect a lot more data, because the more data you get, the more you can train the model and the more the accurate will be the results. Another cool thing that the team has been using is actually, well, engaging people about wildlife and about the sea life, and they've been using VR, so virtual reality. So this metaverse goggles. I know they look a bit, looking at those picture, we look like we're putting people on the, you know, looking at computer instead of actually showing them the wildlife, but that's actually what they're doing. Um, because it's quite hard to get people involved in conservation in the marine environment. Showing these during events has been quite a good way of getting people interested and asking questions and maybe thinking about, volunteering or about anything that's happening in their local coastline. So what our colleague Tori has been doing is actually getting scuba divers to go and film using this 360 camera, the seabed in Northern Ireland, so we could actually show proper pictures of Northern Ireland, like videos of Northern Islands, and not um of anywhere else. And I will try to get that from YouTube. It's not edited yet, so it's not perfect, but it's just to show you what you can get with a 360. It's quite cool. I will silent mute that, but you get someone playing. The color needs to be played around a wee bit, but um with your mouse you can actually look around. You can even say hi to the diver if you want. But the hope is to use this with the goggle for people to have a look around. And I think they've been getting um scuba divers all around the country to collect quite a few different imagery. So I think this one is from some
Eve,
boat or something.
if
Yeah.
you're showing it now, you can't see it.
Oh, sorry, it's not showing. I should have said apologies about that. I've been playing around with the video on my own. Um, oh yeah, I didn't share my screen. I shared this. So
There we
sorry,
go.
I'll go
That's
again.
it. You can see it now.
Thanks. Um, yeah. So as I said, uh, diver here actually filming. Uh, so my joke didn't work. I was wondering. But yeah, filming the seabed, and actually I think that's a maybe a wrecked ship or something. Um, and you can maybe see some fish. But yeah, I think they've been asking scuba divers to do all around, so to have different kind of videos of different features, maybe different wildlife as well. I know there's you can get really nice seabed with like a seaweed and seals, so hopefully they will get a lot more. But as I said, it's not completely edited yet, so there's maybe a bit of work on the imagery. But as you can see, I can just move it with my mouse. But that would be something that could be done um with the goggle as well, and so you'll be able to look around the sea around you. Um, yeah, I think that's all I had. I was gonna show you. Um, yeah, sorry, that's all I had. Anyway, I think we went a bit faster than planned, but thank you very much. I don't know if you can try and guessing where the drone is in this picture, but there's actually is a drone there. It's usually very far away, so hard to see. But I give you a second, and if you can pinpoint, I know I'll just always clean my screen to try to look if it is or not. But actually, this tiny, tiny dot in here is a drone, and it's not quite far yet. We will send it to like up to 1.5 kilometers or something, so it can go quite far, or sometimes more, but as long as we can see it. But that's why we need something so big as well. It's we need to keep sight of it anyway, far enough. But yeah, I think that's me. Thank you very much. Hopefully, it was not too much random talk about different technology and you actually understood something. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Yeah.
I'll stop sharing. Or maybe do you want me to keep sharing, Rory?
Um,
Uh,
I got it here, Eve, for now, but thank you both for that talk. I really enjoyed it. It was great to see all the stuff that we have going on that I wouldn't necessarily get to see ever in my everyday job. Um, before we move on to the Q&A section, I'd just like to tell you about some talks that we have coming up. So our next talk is fully booked for the magic of an Irish rainforest, but if you're interested in bats, fascinating creatures of the night, we have Karen Healy from the NI Bat Group coming in on Wednesday the 5th of March, or our very own Maureen will be doing a talk on helping hedgehogs and our Let Nature In campaign about wildlife gardening on March 12th. And to round off our winter talks, it will be on the 19th of March with Rosemary, our head of nature recovery, about creating butterfly-friendly gardens. I would like to ask if anyone had any questions that they'd like to extend to Rory and Eve. I'd like to thank you both for the great talk as well. Someone has asked, will the recording be available afterwards? Yes. Apologies for any tech issues, but we will be sure to send on the recording to our YouTube and to any of the people who signed up for the talk tonight. Matthew has asked, are you working in tandem with other groups, e.g. NT?
So I
oh,
guess that's oh yeah.
yeah, I guess that's National Trust, I'm assuming, NT. So, in the Peatlands team, anyway, we are establishing what's called the Peatlands Collaborative Network. So, this is a group of a whole pile of different organisations across Northern Ireland who are all involved in peatland restoration works. So yeah, there's I don't know, 12, 13 maybe different bodies involved in it. They have meetings once every couple of months, and the idea is to kind of share learnings, training, potentially eventually technology as well. There's a thought that maybe we're going to start trying to use our drone, like work together in the use of our drones, particularly, because some other organizations might not be able to afford them, or maybe if they're only doing one area, we can do that one area for them rather than them having to buy their own piece of technology. And the hope is that that'll become reciprocal over time, and that other groups maybe if they have something that we don't have, they can help with us. Um, the Yeah, basically everything that Ulster Wildlife does, we try and be collaborative where we can. I know the Marine team definitely work with other organizations as well. Um, yeah, no, so it is. It's fairly collaborative, definitely.
Definitely a good one to ask, to be fair. We had a question here from Jonathan who asked, are there ways to work in volunteer and conservation tech specifically? I was wondering to get involved in conservation that would particularly involve the tech, especially if that's the area that you work in.
Um, don't know exactly in tech. I mean, we do use, as Rory said, a lot of field tech in our field anyway, which we would use with volunteers. But I'm reading that you say you're a software engineer. I think it's a difficult thing where we're conservationists. I've learned most of this from scratch. Rory as well, I think. A bit of training on the side, of course, but and for the drone, I have a drone license, but took a bit of while, and we're still trying to get as experienced as possible, especially using models and automation, which is a work in progress. Um, so probably it could be an interest, I think, for us to like learn a bit more. It just we handle a lot of data as well. We keep well, but making it all more seamless and etc. is always a thing that we're starting to work on. So definitely we can maybe be in touch. Um, but otherwise, if you want to do volunteer work, I know the Peatlands team, it's a bit difficult. We've been in the field a lot until now. It's a bit of a break now with bird breeding season. But if you show your interest, we can get back to you anyway on what we have at the moment. And I know over teams will take volunteers. So
Yeah, we have our volunteers opportunities listed on our website. They'll keep getting updated and stuff as things come along through the year. So that's a good place to keep an eye if you are still interested, Jonathan. Following on from that, Louise asked about any particular experience that is preferred when trying to get work in drone conservation fields. I mean, you kind of touched on that already with general conservation work kind of being the best way to get in, but would you have anything
Yeah.
else to add?
I would say that realistically, you probably get into the conservation field and then the drones come if they're relevant to your job within that. Um, I'm sure if you had your own drone license privately, say business would be more than happy to take you on, but it can be kind of an expensive or whatever thing to do on your own. Most of the time, I think, well, I know for sure for Eve, you got into the job and then the drones just became a regular part of your work.
yeah, I think we got lucky in that it built up with us being here. So I got to learn and get my license with work. But I know I mean, it's a competitive field anyway, conservation is, but if you have people are always interested if you have GIS knowledge or any kind of geographic, what is it called? Geographic information system, so like ArcGIS or QGIS, that's really, really sought after. And if you had your drone and you could get your license, that would be definitely something that people would look for. But yeah, that's a wee bit more of an expensive hobby. But I know you can get most of the drones you need only if they're quite light, you need a smaller license, so it might be a bit easier. And as long as you build hours and know how to use them, that's experience. Um, yeah.
Thanks for that. I'm sure that was quite informative for me too. To be fair, it's a good thing to know. Matthew has asked more specifically about the IR spotting for owls, about pricing for them. I think it's. Would either of you have any idea, or would that be
They
more
are
for the Hades
expensive.
field?
I can tell you that for a
Yeah.
fact. Me and Eve have been keen to get some infrared tech for the Peatlands team, but our glorious leader Simon thinks it might not be as necessary as it is for other teams because they are fairly expensive. Kind of most IR piece of tech. I know a colleague of ours has a spot and scope that she used for a bit of research prior to joining the team, and I think it cost nearly 4 grand for the scope. So I'm sure you can get much cheaper ones than that, but they can kind of be as expensive as you want them to be as well if you want a good, like a really high-end, good quality one.
Yeah, I think it depends. We were looking at drones as well, so because you want it from higher ground, but you can get cameras are very expensive. You can get monoculars, which I think can be okay. Um, you will need, I think it's wholer than a trade-off on quality and how much it sees from how far, if you can record or not. But I know some people will use like a very basic handheld scope, would be way cheaper if that's for just taking photos or something. But yeah, we don't have one yet, so I can tell you exactly about the pricing.
Um, Perfect. Let's see. Graham has asked if Ulster Wildlife has tried using UV light to observe fungi. I'm not sure if that would be either of your topics. And also, is there a type of IR camera that you would recommend for field use if you have any experience with them?
For the first part, the UV light, not fungi, but we have had a go at using them to search for butterfly and moth larvae. So they also fluoresce under UV light. We've been doing quite a lot of butterfly surveys over in the West and in the Sperrins. And we had a placement student who was really interested in having a go with it. So we're out. She bought it. We got a rake of UV torches, and we're all out at night checking all of the leaves and the trees around near where the office was, and it was really cool actually. The way that they fluoresce made it way easier to spot them. Um, now I haven't had a go with fungi, but that does sound pretty interesting, and I would actually like to try that. In terms of actually recommending an IR camera, uh, I personally wouldn't be able to. You'd be able to work it out quicker yourself than I could tell you. But maybe, I don't know, Eve, if you have any recommendations.
No, not the top of my head. I would know like very high end or stuff, but yeah, that's a lot of money. Yeah, just Googling. I'm sure there's a lot of people now are doing infrared for a bat survey as well. I know doing a course a long time ago, so there is information out there. So, but sorry, yeah, no, can help.
Thank you for that. Marta has asked, have you any experience using drones to map cliff faces in any of the peatland sites or any of our other sites?
Sorry, I didn't. Can you repeat that? I
Oh,
couldn't find the
sorry.
question.
Yeah, have you got any experience using drones to map cliff faces or cliff edges?
Well, ourselves, we wouldn't because that's where you wouldn't really get bugs
Yeah.
on the cliff edge. I don't know if any of the team marine would maybe have done that. I think they've done seals mostly and out of the coast. I don't think they would really. We would have on nature reserve surveying like cliff edge of like one of our nature reserve. They would do it with just observing bird and counting them with boats. I don't know. It's always a trick. I think if it's for cliff nesting birds, you don't want to disturb them. But I think with some of our drone, we fly very high, so you wouldn't have that. But I don't know about cliff edges. Always a bit scarier to me, I think, sending the drone there near, with the change of wind and the water. I don't know if I would send a big one anyway.
I've almost lost a small drone at sea, so yeah, that was actually my own personal one. But I know that people like RSPB and stuff are starting to use drones more and more to survey, as Eve was saying, breeding bird populations on cliffs. I don't see any reason why they couldn't map using it as well, assuming that they could get the drone to hold still enough. It would have to be a very non-windy day. I don't know, Eve, that would you would probably know
Well,
better than me.
or using LiDAR, but yeah,
You
it depends
theoretically
what you,
could,
yeah.
couldn't
Yeah.
you? I would guess.
Yeah,
Uh,
I wouldn't know about it, but it must be someone has for sure done it, I would think, but
Yeah, just not us.
an interesting one to think about. Peter asked how much of the data gathered is shared with government over and above species reports, maybe from Peatlands Marine. How much of you guys' stuff from the drones would be shared on with government?
Well, um, all of our everything in our team anyway that we gather is basically to try and produce these habitat like these peatland restoration plans. So all of that data feeds into these plans. And whenever we've produced those plans, they'll have to go to NIEA to be approved before we can carry them out, particularly on designated sites. So while we might not be like sharing the kind of every bit of data, every bit of data does feed into those plans eventually. So the kind of outcome from them is eventually shared with government to some extent. Um, and yeah, for the marine team, they're trying to kind of influence marine policy a lot. So they'll be sharing with people like the minister and say they get a really good bit of footage of their like a protected area, a marine protected area that they want highlighted. That might go to whatever a minister in charge or someone who's kind of has some influence to change policy in that area. Um, yeah, so a lot of it would end up getting shared to some degree, but it just wouldn't be like we're not sharing on a day-to-day basis every bit of footage and every bit of LiDAR or whatever that we're kind of taking in.
Perfect. Adrian has asked, this is quite maybe a more difficult one. Is there future potential to use this type of technology with regard to elimination of what are regarded as best species, like grey squirrels, minks, rats? If that's not something that you guys are aware of or know about,
Well,
perfectly fine. We can.
I was reading that. Yeah, I think if you mean like invasive species, maybe we've done it more for peatlands in terms of like removing rhododendron and conifer. Well, we are at the stage of like we can use the drones and stuff to map these areas, and surprisingly, well, non-surprisingly, but we've been flying a lot in the winter to get actually those conifers and rhodey to show up really well on the imagery and be able to target them quite easily. I think we're thinking about getting a bit more automation so that the laptop could actually, well, the model could identify all these. Um, I know we've been discussing because some people said that you could have some ways to control, like, well, vegetation at least with drone. We're not there, I don't know, about yet. For species, well, they've used in that if we do survey and we know where they are, they can be used for any follow-up control, but I don't know what kind of technology could be used other than that. Um,
There's more monitoring
More
purposes
so
than plant
surveying.
species. Yeah, just surveying in general. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We had another question here. Does Ulster Wildlife use any remote tech for monitoring of river pollution? Are you aware of Marine Team doing any inland, or do you guys do any
Well,
with peatlands with runoff and stuff?
not really remote tech, but we are going to start doing a little bit of water monitoring. So we'll be because a lot of some of the really degraded peatlands, the peat kind of runs off into the waterways. So we are, as of this month, in fact, as of a few days' time, we'll be starting to take samples from a couple of streams nearby some of our sites, and those will go to University of Ulster, and they will kind of monitor them for dissolved organic carbon, the discoloration from the peat, nutrient level, that kind of stuff. We're going to record that now before we've restored these sites, keep recording it while the restoration is going on, and then keep it going in the years following. So we can hopefully see that doing this restoration work over time will reduce the amount of runoff that's going from these degraded peatland sites into our rivers and help them over the long term. In terms of if you're kind of thinking more of your like sewage runoff and your Loch Ness type stuff, we aren't heavily involved in that as an organization. There's quite a number of other like the rivers trusts that are kind of specifically targeting that area. Um, yeah, it's just we don't really have an inland aquatic ecology team where marine peatlands species. There's just other organizations who are a little bit better kind of suited to target that area, particularly I'm thinking of like your Boundary Rivers Trust and those kind of guys.
Perfect. We're running up here to the half 9 mark, so I'm going to just ask the last couple of questions, if that's okay. We had another one from Jonathan asking, are the AI models you use, like Chirpity or the model for counting seals, adequately trained for native Irish species? So we have a large data set here for local wildlife data. A few years ago, he worked on a model to identify Irish hares from camera trap footage, as there wasn't a lot out there. Has this changed in recent years?
I think that's quite a good question in general. I don't know you can answer for Chirpity. I think it's a big thing in AI, at least, is that you need enough data for it to learn. And I've worked on previous projects elsewhere in the world, but like trying to teach them, you need a lot of native species, and it's usually the data that's lacking. So I think actually having those on the ground and collecting and maybe making comments or will help train in the future. I know the automated one, the AMI from UKCH, is still quite a work in progress, and I think they do intend to learn a lot more from the data we send. So that's why they were keen to have them on different habitats, and also having them maybe in Northern Ireland, as I think we're the only one having them. I don't know, Rory, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, so Chirpity's definitely not perfect. If anyone's ever, oh, what's going on there? Yeah, sorry, pop up. Chirpity's definitely not perfect. It has a couple different kind of online data sets you can use. Um, that it can draw from for using it for like its detection. Um, Birds generally are probably one of our best kind of recorded species. It's a lot of people have a lot of interest in them. A lot of bird recording goes on. So there are a number of pretty decent, like kind of AI bird song recognizers now. Even if a lot of that data is kind of targeted at like maybe American or European mainland species, there's still a decent amount for UK and Irish species. So in my experience of using them, they do work fairly well. But no, there's still a long way to go. The more records they get, the better they'll get over time. Irish hares, well, that's a really interesting thing that we've been working on. Um, I can imagine that probably footage and stuff to train that will be quite limited because mammals are a bit harder to kind of get regular records of.
I know there was some good project, and I think maybe that's one thing we'll use in the future. But using there's a website where you get community to help actually tag what they see in the image, and the more people do it, the more it learns. I know there was some discussion to do it in Ulster Wildlife. I don't know if that will ever happen, but you can find out. I cannot remember the website, of course, off the top of my head, but it's you can score camera trapping. But yeah, it's been used a lot in camera trapping around the world anyway. So hopefully in the future will
Well,
save us a bit of time.
thank you both for that. It's definitely about as much you put into AI as you'll get out. We're going to finish with one last question before we leave you all for the evening. Peter asked, does Ulster Wildlife do any ammonia monitoring on the bogs, or is it all contracted out?
Nope, we do it in-house. I go to Curran every month. Eve goes to a couple of different bog sites every month. I think we do all of our own ammonia monitoring, don't we? Or do
Well,
we?
yeah, NIA for some site that we work on, they're like NIA reserve, so they would do their own. But yeah, we do still collect a few. I don't know if there's discussion of adding a few more collection site at the moment. We're not doing that many, like
Yeah,
few.
we don't do it on every site, so
Mm.
we don't really need to contract it out, if you know what I mean. But we theoretically we're going to get some trainees in the coming months, so we could maybe start to monitor a few more sites, I think.
Perfect. Well, it's coming close to 9:30, and we'll end you on a nice Peatlands question rather than jumping you with another team thing. So I would like to thank you both again for the talk. Thank you, Rory and Eve, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. You'll receive a recorded version of the talk, and if you have any other questions, do feel free to reach out to us, and please do complete the feedback form, as it is very helpful for us to make these talks better for you guys. But thank you very much, and have a nice rest of your evening, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate all
Thank
the
you
good
very
questions.
much.
Take care. Hope it was good.